Alderman Cappleman, followed by Alderman Ramirez Rosas.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give a little bit of a background so it makes sense to my question. I have 7 homeless shelters within 3 blocks of my home. And should a person be evicted from one of those shelters due to their behavior, they're left roaming the streets. I have 4 nursing homes for people with chronic mental illness, and the police are often called there when there's a crisis involving a client who's quite agitated. I have a 50-unit housing for people with mental illness who also have an addiction. And because they're not allowed to use drugs in their apartments, they use them on the streets. We had gunfire just in that area last night, about 20 shots fired. I have numerous housing units run by nonprofits where a disproportionate number of them experience mental illness. And I have 2 large homeless encampments a few blocks away from me with a disproportionate number of these people on disability due to their mental illness. And per an article entitled Social Defeat and the Culture of Chronicity, it was reported that the Uptown community has the highest rate of mental illness in the United States. So through the chair, I'd like to know more about the 911 calls that come through each of our 22 police districts. I want to know what the percentage of calls we get that are related to public drinking, because we have a lot of people with mental illness who self-medicate with alcohol. Mm. The percentage of calls related to homelessness, the percentage of calls.
Alderman Cappleman, I apologize for cutting you off a little bit, but we kind of want to focus on the budget issues here, and I understand the importance of the issues you're raising, but for purposes of this subject matter hearing today, we want to keep it focused on answers or questions that Director Lee, Director Park can answer with regard to the budget.
Fully understand, and that's the point of this question. If I hear from the police officers, they are very frustrated about being put in the role of social workers. The city of Austin uses social workers in their police departments. So I think it's fair to ask, can we look at the idea of having, as we get police attrition, can we have social workers replace them to address these crises that police are oftentimes addressing, which is not even related to why they entered law enforcement in the first place?
I'm going to jump in here, Chairman, and direct that question to Director Lee, because I know that this has been given some thought.
So, Alderman, I appreciate that question. I think that is the question on the line, which is that, what are the right calls that police should respond to, and what are calls that perhaps police don't have to respond to. And I think it requires a lot of thoughtful process and thinking. And so thank you for raising that. As you know, some of these situations that involve mental health or substance abuse will turn into violence in some cases. And so I think what we at CPD and the City Hall Mayor's Office is contemplating is a co-responder model and piloting that in a few places to see how we can manage a kind of a menu of options of who might respond depending on severity and intensity and so forth. So we are working on that, but it is not yet ready. And certainly will be more ready around the time of the budget, because obviously a model like that will take a set of resources to make happen.
Thank you. There are cities across the country that are already utilizing something along those lines. I do like the idea of having social workers work with the police, because when the police go out, and I have observed a police officer give an ANOF to an individual who's had over 75 arrests. She's bipolar and alcohol addiction. I've seen her tear up the ANOF in front of the police officer and walk away. The police officer's frustrated, And this woman is frustrated, the community is frustrated. Having a social worker work with this person would make everyone's lives much easier.
So agreed. I think the issue, absolutely, there are many models out there, including Oregon and Houston and Dallas, as well as LA, many models out there. I think we have to find the one that fits Chicago, given the varying levels of intensity and potential public safety concerns around that.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Point of information on,
Alderman Moore, point of information.
thank you for bringing that question, Alderman, but from a budgetary standpoint, would that help us based on somebody's experiences out there? If that number came out, because he was asking about cost, would that help us reduce police officers, or will we still have those police officers, but adding social workers? So how can that, or could that impact the budget?
It's difficult to tell until we try the pilot. I think we have to figure out whether, for example, the ratio of cases where only a social worker could respond versus where they have to be co-responding. And so until we actually have a good sense of the severity and intensity of those calls for service and how we respond, and did we respond well, and did it lead to good outcomes, we won't really know what the budget implications will be. We do know it will take additional resources that we will have to pull from the city and from multiple places in order to have the pilot run, but we're not sure of whether it does give us savings or not at this point.
Thank you.
Chairman, point of information also.
Point of information, Chairman Dow.
Yeah. Director Lee, have you all already assessed the 911 calls to see what kinds of calls are that are non-police oriented? What kind of calls are coming in and under what priority order?
We regularly assess the 911 calls around mental health calls, particularly because of a consent decree item around crisis response. We have not done some of the other categories that Alderman Cappleman spoke about, and we'll need to do that for sure as we move forward.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd also want to include domestic violence as well.
Thank you, Alderman Cappleman.